January, chaos in Washington. Trading was largely unaffected by the mob attack in Washington on January 6th. While a mob that stormed the Capitol building delayed presidential certification and led to horrible violence, it did not stop the process or institutions, and lawmakers were able to reconvene later that night. Number 2, crypto milestone. The total value of the entire cryptocurrency market surpassed $1 trillion for the first time as Bitcoin rocketed through $37,700. Many large institutional investors piled into the market, looking to diversify even more of their assets to hedge against inflation and geopolitical risk. A large number of retail investors and trend-following quant funds also joined the race due to FOMO, or fear of missing out, on a quick and easy buck. And number 3, the meme stock craziness. Wall Street Bet subreddit and their army of day traders took the market by storm, triggering squeezes on heavily shorted stocks like GameStop, AMC, and Bed Bath & Beyond. In February, there was a cold snap, a deep freeze enveloping large swath of the US-tested Texas highly decentralized electricity model. It was a disaster in Texas. I was there when this was happening and stuck for 3 days. Number 2, Tesla buys Bitcoin. The crypto surge past $42,000 after Tesla disclosed a $1.5 billion investment and said it would begin accepting Bitcoin for payment in the near future. Less than 2 months later, the automaker discontinued the program, with Musk pointing to Bitcoin's energy usage and raising quite a few eyebrows in the industry. And number 3, global semiconductor shortage. Chip shortage affected all industries, especially the auto industry, but chip companies such as AMD, Nvidia, and Qualcomm benefit from this shortage. The COVID-19 pandemic triggered a surge in demand for PCs and other electronics as remote work and online learning became the new normal, and the demand still remains at record highs. In March, there was a crypto art. The auction house Christie's sold every day the first 5,000 days for $69.3 million, far eclipsing anything that has been bought in the non-fungible token or NFT industry. I posted a video on NFT which summarized pretty well on NFT. The JPEG was a mosaic of every image that artist Mike Winkelmann, who goes by the name Beeple, has made since 2013, the American Rescue Plan. Congress gave the final green light to President Biden's $1.9 trillion economic stimulus plan, clearing the way for one of the largest relief packages in U.S. history. It was hailed as the centerpiece of Biden's first 100 days and included $1,400 payments for most Americans, expanded unemployment insurance, funding for schools and public health, and state and local government aid. The legislation also featured a per-child cash payment of at least $3,000 for 1 year, an expansion of Obamacare subsidies for 2 years, as well as aid for restaurants, agriculture, and small businesses. Stuck in Suez. A massive container ship, the Ever Given, got stuck in the Suez Canal after losing the ability to steer due to high winds and a dust storm. About 12% of global trade and roughly 30% of the world's shipping container volume transit through the Suez Canal. A rough estimate showed the blockage cost about $400 million an hour. And still today, further weighs on supply chains that are strained during the pandemic. Archego's implosion. The high-profile hedge fund defaulted on margin calls from several global investment banks including Credit Suisse, Nomura, Morgan Stanley, and Goldman Sachs. The fund manager Bill Huang reportedly lost $8 billion in just 10 days. April, there was a timber issue. Commodity prices caused some panic, with one in particular going on a major rip. Wood. Lumber futures saw contracts soar nearly 100% year to date, trading as high as $1,686 per thousand board feet. That had knock-on effects across the economy, like the housing market, with prices surging for real estate nationwide. Worker shortage. Job openings soared to a record $9.3 million in April as the economy reopened. But 3.5 million Americans were still on weekly jobless benefits and more than 9 million remained unemployed. Apple's major privacy change. Fresh updates came to iPhones worldwide as Apple began rolling out iOS 14.5. Its new operating software that includes loads of new features. The one that grabbed headlines was Apple's new privacy change called App Tracking Transparency, which centers around access to unique iPhone IDs. Users were asked by each app if they are okay with being tracked across other apps and websites, bringing seismic changes to the nearly $100 billion mobile advertising market. A lot of social media companies such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and so on were significantly affected by Apple's privacy change. In May, we had the pipeline disruption. The US government declared a state of emergency to keep fuel supply lines opened following the shutdown of Colonial Pipeline, which is about 45% of its supply of diesel, gasoline, and jet fuel in the East Coast. Colonial ended up paying $4.4 million in Bitcoin to hackers. Who let the Doge out? Another crypto craze took the market by the storm as a parabolic rally for altcoins, which are cryptos other than Bitcoin, led the value of all digital tokens past $2.3 trillion. Dogecoin, a crypto that started as a joke, changed hands at as high as 74 cents, or up 12,000% since the beginning of 2021. Things didn't last long as Elon Musk, who has been pumping Doge, went on SNL as the Doge father and called the crypto Dogecoin a hustle. June. Cannabis legislation efforts continued to expand across the U.S. and the movement won another big backer, Amazon. The nation's second largest employer said it would no longer screen its worker for the drug. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer from the New York later introduced a draft of legislation that would legalize marijuana on the federal level, which was meant to spur discussion for a formal introduction of a bill and comprehensive reform. Inflation. A higher than expected inflation printed in the U.S. showed prices soaring by 5% compared with a year ago, marking the biggest increase since the Great Recession. Fed Chair Jerome Powell still stood by his transitory inflation thesis, pointing to supply chain disruptions amid extremely strong demand for labor, goods, and services. However, the central bank brought forward the timeframe on when it would raise rates next. 2 hikes in 2023, while Powell said in March that he saw no increases until at least 2024. July, the billionaire space race. Richard Branson, the 70-year-old founder of Virgin Galactic, rode the VSS Unity into the lower reaches of space. Shares of Virgin Galactic, or SPCE, were soaring by 10% to $54. Jeff Bezos' turn came a week later aboard Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket. The two billionaires also sparred over definition, with Blue Origin emphasizing that it flew over the Kármán line, a boundary 62 miles above sea level that's commonly referred to as the beginning of space. Robinhood IPO. In one of the year's most highly anticipated listings, Robinhood, the ticker symbol HOOD, priced its IPO at $38 per share, on the low end of a marketed range. It now trades near $17. August, plan for Afghanistan. Taliban fighters took over the presidential palace in Kabul after a stunning blitz across Afghanistan that saw them seize most of the country in just over a week. The lightning sweep comes after the U.S. spent nearly 2,500 American lives trying to ensure the territory would not become a terrorist haven, while attempting to refashion the nation into a pro-Western democracy. The war cost the U.S. taxpayer an estimated $2.26 trillion. Storm warning. Hurricane Ida slammed into Louisiana as a Category 4 storm, lashing the coast with 150-mile-per-hour winds, torrential downpours, and life-threatening storm surges. By nightfall, power was knocked out to the entire New Orleans metropolitan area. The cost of the storm exceeded $65 billion. September. Opioid settlement. U.S. bankruptcy judge Robert Drain approved a sweeping settlement for Purdue Pharma, the maker of OxyContin, hoping to resolve thousands of lawsuits from state and local governments. It would also set up a compensation fund that will pay some victims of drugs an expected $3,500 to $48,000 each. China property crisis. Contagion fears surfaced as China property company Evergrande risks a collapse. The company is not only one of China's biggest property developers, but is mostly indebted in the equivalent of more than $300 billion in total liabilities. Fed evolution. At the central bank's meeting, the central bank said it would cut its monthly treasury purchases by $10 billion and mortgage-backed securities by $5 billion. But that wasn't enough. Powell eventually unveiled a faster tapering to the Fed's asset purchase program, shifting gears to the tighter monetary policy and retired the word transitory. Powell was nominated for another 4-year term at the Federal Reserve. October, global energy crisis. Energy prices continue to surge to fresh records as renewed fears stoked panic about the worst shortage in decades. Supply was just not there as economies rebounded from a pandemic-induced lull, while problems like logistical logjams and transport bottlenecks added to the pressure. Squid Millions. Netflix said its mega-hit Squid Game could be worth nearly $900 million. The 9-episode horror thriller rose sharply in the headlines since its debut on September 17th and ranked number 1 in several countries, including in the US. The South Korean show involves heavily indebted people who compete in children's games for a chance to win big cash prizes. Through the challenges come with fatal consequences. Truth Social. Former President Donald Trump launched his own media network, the new business called Trump Media and Technology Group. Will include a social media platform called Truth Social as well as subscription video on-demand service that features non-woke entertainment programming, news, and podcasts. The company is going public via a SPAC merger with Miami-based Digital World Acquisition, DWAC, which surged from $10 all the way to $175 before falling back to earth. Meet Meta. Facebook CEO Zuckerberg used his keynote address at the Connect conference to unveil the social media giant's new corporate identity, Meta. November. Tesla CEO Elon Musk has sold more than $15 billion worth of shares in the company since early November. Santa's early start. The Port of Los Angeles and the neighboring Port of Long Beach, both among the busiest ports in the U.S., began operating 24 hours a day and 7 days a week to ease cargo bottlenecks that led to shortages and high consumer costs. COP26. Nearly 200 countries struck an agreement to ramp up efforts to fight global warming. They specifically pointed to the lack of enforcement mechanism, relying only on good faith to follow the rules as best as they can. Time for a breakup. Unveiling one of the biggest changes in the industrial's giant history, General Electric announced plans to split into 3 global public companies: aviation, healthcare, and renewable energy and power. The bipartisan infrastructure bill. President Biden signed the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill, which finally passed in Congress after months of negotiation. $110 billion would be allocated for roads and bridges, $66 billion for rails, $55 billion for water and wastewater infrastructure, and $39 billion for public transit. There was also money for ports, high-speed broadband internet, replacing lead water pipes, and building a network of electric vehicle charging stations. December. A Starbucks store in Buffalo became the first location in the country to unionize after employees voted by a margin of 19-8 to join the Workers United Union. Quarantine cut. The CDC updated recommendations for COVID-19 control, shortening isolation restrictions from 10 to 5 days for all Americans who test positive for the virus. That's as long as they are asymptomatic, though they should still wear a mask around others for a further 5 days. Meanwhile, individuals who have received their booster shot do not need to quarantine following an exposure, but should wear a mask for 10 days after the exposure. The CDC said its guidance was in line with the growing evidence suggesting that people infected with COVID-19 are most infectious 1 to 2 days before and 2 to 3 days after the onset of symptoms. BBB. President Biden was dealt a severe blow to his economic agenda after West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin outright rejected the nearly $2 trillion Build Back Better plan. Negotiations had been underway for much of the past 6 months, but the latest disagreements means the bill is likely doomed unless his demands are met for a smaller, less sweeping package. Let's take a look at some stock that I owned this year and have been popular and hot, and I believe that they will continue to be popular and hot. Tesla, up for about 50% in 2021. I believe that Tesla will be in a consolidation stage for the next weeks. Then will break out to reach the high of $1,220, reached in early November before Elon Musk announced his sales of his stock. It will unlikely go down below $900, therefore any buy at around $900 would be a good entry. Apple is up about 30% in 2021, better than the S&P 500 index and NASDAQ. Apple is one of my favorite stocks. You cannot go wrong with owning this stock, but it goes up in the long term. In particular, Apple started developing its VR and eventually Apple Car. Any such news would make Apple stock share price jump. Nvidia is the biggest favorite stock of the year. It went up about 130% for the year. And because of various reasons such as chip shortage, crypto mining, VR, AI, and so on, Nvidia will only continue to be higher in 2022. The S&P 500 went about 28% in 2021. I believe most of us can not reach a return of 28% a year. Most retail investors cannot beat indexes. Therefore, owning some QQQ, VOO, or QYLD would be a good idea to keep your capital safe. Surprisingly, Microsoft went up by more than 50% in 2021, and this is one of my stocks I own. Another stock I own is Costco, which went up more than 50% in 2021. I posted a video on Costco a couple weeks ago, so check that out. That's 2021. Let's get ready for 2022, and I hope you guys have a good year. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.